Alright YouTube, I decided to dedicate an entire video to this topic because mentioning it occasionally in my other videos and telling people this in comments areas doesn't seem to actually be effective. Do not confuse my disdain for Hillary Clinton as being adulation of, worship of, or blind approval of Donald Trump or Donald Trump's policies. You have to remember, frame this in the situation as it really is. For most of this election, I supported Gary Johnson. I got off of the Gary Johnson campaign a few days before his Aleppo mistake, out of a general sense that he wasn't taking the ideology of libertarianism seriously. I don't care about party, you've got to understand. This is the main reason why. I'm not a party loyalist. I never have been to any party. There was a brief time I considered myself a Democrat many, many years ago before realizing, yeah, they're subject to the same problems as the Republicans. The Libertarian Party, obviously, unfortunately, has fallen victim to the same mentality. And what you have are people who blindly follow a candidate thinking that they represent a certain type of ideology, giving their own meaning to that ideology, when in many cases they don't. For instance, Hillary Clinton is not a liberal. Her critics may call her one, her fans may call her one, which is very interesting, but she's not. She even states to her donors, yeah, she straddles the center left and center right. I would say that she's right in the middle of the center. She does not wish to liberalize our economic situation beyond applying a so-called tax on the rich that won't do anything to anyone who actually is truly deserving of having their taxes upped, including Clinton herself, including people like Donald Trump, because they'll continue to use the same tax write-offs over time. So it wouldn't affect the people you actually would get the most income from. What it'll end up affecting is the doctors and the surgeons and people and the managers of local businesses, small business owners, maybe large farmers. Those are the people that get screwed. Well, thanks, Hillary. I'm sure, yeah, they're the few tens of extra millions of dollars you get from some of these people is great, but what about the few tens of trillions of dollars over time you could derive from the hedge fund class or some of these other wealthy individuals if you actually just simplified the tax code, didn't bother to raise taxes on anybody, and in fact slash taxes for the lower and middle classes, which you could. You could cut the middle class tax rate by 50% and still make more money over time if you just fucking simplified the tax code, which is what Trump has suggested. Which is why I also say Trump's not a neocon. He's not a conservative in the sense that a lot of conservatives understand it to be. He's not. He's not a conservative. He's a paleocon more than he's a new wave conservative. If he simplifies the tax code in the manner he's suggested, it would screw the multinational corporations and the military complex. They'd be the ones feeling the pain because they'd actually be paying money for the first time in a good 30 years. It would be small businesses that would get most of the so-called upper-class tax relief, when Clinton, rightfully so, denotes, oh, well, most of these tax cuts he's proposing go to the upper class. Yeah, they go to the upper class in the sense of the upper class being the brain surgeon or the small business owner or the large family farm or something like that. Yeah, they're going to get a lot of tax relief. That creates jobs. That's a good thing for the economy. But if you've simplified and reformed the tax code, people who are well above that level, people who are making billions of dollars, hedge fund manager, corporate CEO, corporation in general, head of some multinational bank, they go from paying nothing to paying that new lower rate, yes, but at least they're paying, and they make so much more money that it will far outweigh the cuts that you've just made to the working rich. Which do exist. Some brain surgeon making $500,000 a year, okay. Yeah, they're pulling in a high income, but they're working hard for that. They're not just managing other people's money. They're not just printing currency and working in some fucking bank bureau somewhere. Those are the people you want to go after. Most of them don't pay anything. Trump's a living example. Yeah, he uses loopholes. He uses a tax scheme to avoid paying taxes. Hillary's an example of one of these people. She's done the same thing. Supposedly leaves the White House broke, and then years later becomes multi-millionaire wealthy. Well, how did that happen? It's because of all the money she makes giving speeches, primarily, promising people kickbacks if she's elected. Did this as a senator, too. I assure you. And she still gets that pension too, which is laughable, considering all she ever did in the Senate was vote for the war in Iraq. But the fact that I happen to enjoy Trump's tax proposals, which I do, it'd be great for me. I think it'd be great for the economy. Doesn't mean I give a god fuck about half of his other policies. I'm ambivalent towards them. Most of them mean nothing to me. Build a wall. Okay. Mildly effective at the very least. Certainly psychological tool to prevent people from coming into the country. Not going to be 100% effective. Will cost billions of dollars. You can wage a tariff war with Mexico to pay for it. That's indeed true. But ultimately, at the end of the day, who gives a fuck? As far as I'm concerned, it's not one of the issues I consider most major. Crushing ISIS. Well, it's all well and good to say you're going to crush ISIS. I would be surprised if he actually pulls it off. I'm still going to vote for him despite this, though. Here's what you have to realize. I disdain Hillary Clinton, and I pointed this out specifically. I know that Clinton is corrupt. I know that she's a liar. I know that she's a career politician and has a political mind. Her main skill is manipulating people. That's her main skill. With Trump, I don't know that. I have a suspicion that that might be the case, but I don't know because he's never been in politics before. And therefore, because he's not yet in politics, I have no way of knowing. I would rather have a 50-50 chance of Trump being corrupt when he gets into office and a 50-50 chance of him doing a good job than to go with the 100% chance that Hillary's corrupt when she gets into office. It's just common sense. That's why I'm going to vote for Trump. As for Johnson, I once considered him a viable alternative. I said, well, in the state of Vermont, it probably won't be that competitive. I may be wrong now, which is another reason to switch over. It looks like the screwing of Bernie Sanders had a profound impact here. I'm not sure that it allows Trump to get within striking distance in this state, but she's by no means ahead of him like Obama was ahead of Romney or McCain. So I have to take that into consideration, of course. The thing is, Gary Johnson, even before making all of these mistakes on, what's Aleppo and so forth, and all of the other crazy shit that he's been doing, it makes him look like he has not actually given up smoking marijuana on the campaign trail as he claims. That is a possibility. I don't care if he does, but it is making him say stupid things, and that's the reason why he probably should put the pipe down for the rest of the election, for his own benefit and the benefit of the Libertarian movement, I suppose. But he stopped representing libertarianism. He came out a few days ago on the TPP. Now, on the TPP, he had said some time ago, yeah, I guess I support it because it's free trade. He realized it wasn't, and I applauded him for this. He said, no, in retrospect, it doesn't appear to be a free trade deal. It appears to be an interventionist deal primarily related to censorship, so I no longer can say I support it. Now, I gave him a pass on that. I said, okay, well, maybe he just didn't think too much about it, heard free trade deal, and automatically assumed it was a free trade deal, and that he supported it. When he realized it wasn't, then he switched off and said, no, it's not actual free trade, so the Libertarian platform would be against it. But a few days ago, he comes out and apparently says again, yeah, I'd sign the TPP. What are you thinking? How can I consider you, number one, a viable candidate? You'd switch your mind constantly. Number two, how are you even a libertarian? If you're going to sign the TPP, well, there's libertarian fiscal principles essentially completely decimated. That one deal brings censorship, which is the exact opposite of what libertarianism would suggest. We should have no censorship. It brings government intervention into the private market. It brings government protectionism into trade. It allows foreign states to meddle in our domestic affairs. There couldn't be anything less libertarian than the TPP. You couldn't concoct a so-called trade deal that was less libertarian than the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So for him to say, well, I guess I'm still for it, that doesn't fly with me. It doesn't make any sense why you would have that opinion if you are a libertarian. What I say is Gary Johnson is not a libertarian. He's simply the standard bearer of the Libertarian Party. Ideology and party no longer in this election appear to overlap. The Republicans are no longer led by a conservative. They're led by a populist paleocon or quasi-paleocon. The Democrats aren't being led by a liberal. They're being led by a neoliberal corporate centrist. The Green Party is not being led by a socialist so much as they are an old hippie woman who apparently reads tarot cards in order to determine what her next course of the election will be. So, at this point, I'm looking at the actual ideologies professed by these people rather than the parties. And I've said Trump's ideology, ironically enough, is arguably on some issues closer to libertarianism than Gary Johnson's. And when I realized that, I said, whoa, well, I guess I have to support Trump. When people say, oh, well, he's incoherent, so what? I don't give a crap about the way he talks. But that doesn't mean, by the way, that I plan to support him or whatever, that I plan to vote for him. That does not mean that I look at that same ideology and say, oh, well, it totally overlaps with mine, make America great again. That's not. Do I sit here wearing a Trump hat? No, I sit here wearing a pentagram. When Trump talks about religion, I just ignore it. Because I say, well, yeah, it's obvious, I'm not going to agree with what he happens to say. At the same time, and this is why people saying, well, non-Christians shouldn't vote for Trump. Well, Hillary has also pandered to the Southern Baptist Convention, gone to a bunch of churches and talked about religiosity. So I'm going to apply the exact same ethos to them both. I don't care what they have to say about religion. I don't care what they say about spirituality. My spiritual beliefs are my own. It doesn't influence my decision-making unless a candidate comes out and suggests a pogrom against witches or something like that. But it's never going to happen, so I don't give a fuck. No, I look at Trump and I look at Clinton, I compare them. I say, on some issues, basically the same. They both seem to believe that the unconstitutional practice of denying the Second Amendment to people on the no-fly list, for example, is acceptable. I completely disagree with Trump on this. I completely disagree with Clinton on this. I agree more with Gary Johnson on this issue. But that one issue does not a campaign I can support make. On most issues, it seems Gary Johnson is becoming more like a male pot-smoking version of Hillary Clinton. And I don't know exactly why any so-called Republicans would be supporting it. It's funny. He's racking up endorsements left and right. As a stopgap, what's happened is that the Republicans that don't believe Trump can win, I think they're wrong, but the Republicans in the Republican side of the newsprint media that think that Trump is doomed have taken up endorsing Gary Johnson. They can't bring themselves to endorse a Democrat most of the time, but they can endorse somebody on a third party that they know is going to lose. It's very, very funny, actually, to see so many newspapers going for Johnson. It's also very funny to see people, Democrats, who say that it's a good thing that Hillary Clinton is being endorsed by the Bush family and all of these other sort of neocons, which the Democratic Party spent the better part of 20 years demonizing and saying, well, they're basically Hitler, they're basically Satan. It's very, very funny, because it should be showing people the moneyed interests do want Hillary Clinton. That's the other reason I plan to vote for Trump. It is now abundantly clear that virtually every corrupt power structure in this country, including, increasingly, a lot of Republicans that don't deserve to be voted back in, back Hillary Clinton. There's a reason for that. There's a reason that they're endorsing it. There's a reason why you've got, some corporate newspaper that hasn't endorsed a Democrat in 100 years ignoring the Trump campaign. Because the sort of tax, I think it has mostly to do with the fiscal side, honestly. It doesn't have anything to do with, he'll start World War III, he's Hitler. They know better than that. And they know that's not actually true. That's just yellow journalism. They use that to cover up the real reason. You know what the real reason is? A lot of these businesses, including media entities, will actually have to start paying taxes under the reform proposal that he's put forward. They don't want to do that. They don't want to have to pay so much as a penny in taxes. We saw it. The New York Times pays nothing in taxes. They get money back by the hundreds of thousands. You think that they want Trump to come in, lower the highest tax bracket, yes, but then eliminate the schemes that they use to avoid paying anything so that they suddenly have to pay 15-20% of what they're making out? Hell to the no. They want to keep that money. They want to keep getting, basically, free money from the government for existing, for no apparent reason. That's why they oppose Trump. Follow the money is a why. When Trump says follow the money every time he talks about the crooked media or crooked Hillary or whatever, he's doing a wise thing. Because it's a good idea. If you follow the money, you'll see it's because of the reforms that he's proposing that a lot of these entities don't like him. They'll actually have to start paying money. The Bushes, Their business and interests that currently they pay no taxes. They'd finally have to pay taxes. What Hillary Clinton has suggested is, oh, well, we'll raise taxes on the rich. It doesn't address the loopholes and schemes specifically used by all these businesses and rich hedge fund billionaires to avoid paying anything no matter how high the rate is. Wouldn't matter if it was a 99% tax. They would still avoid paying anything because the loopholes exist. What Trump's proposing is, yeah, the rich pay less, but they will have to pay. There will be no business entity that pays nothing. It won't exist anymore because there won't be any write-offs that they can take. It'd be good, I believe, for the economy. We'd see probably see an extra $1 trillion enter our economy under his tax. I don't care when they say that it would increase the deficit. I say, my goodness, you poor, poor fools. You don't understand how corporations operate. You don't understand that a large plurality, a significant sum of the entire U.S. population, is employed by a business that pays nothing. They don't pay nothing because of evil Republicans. They pay nothing because of the two-party system, and because neither the Republicans nor the Democrats have done anything either than manipulate the tax brackets over time without ever once even taking a serious look at eliminating the reasons why there would be anybody who offshores a penny without it being taxed, who pays nothing in taxes to begin with, who gets money like the New York Times does back from the government for absolutely no reason despite making tens of millions of dollars. It doesn't make sense. The tax system we use doesn't make sense. Once it begins to make sense, we probably won't have that many fiscal problems. And I believe that Trump is capable of implementing such a system. He'll have to drag some of Congress kicking and screaming to the table to get it through, but I believe that he can probably show people facts and figures and browbeat Congress into supporting it. Probably get rid of Citizens United. He's more likely to get rid of Citizens United than Hillary, because he's not taking the bank money and the corporation money like Hillary is. Half of her donations overall come from these groups, half of which have ties to foreign states. I don't feel comfortable with that. But the fact that I enjoy his fiscal plan, the fact that I recognize Johnson's a lunatic, doesn't mean that I fawn in support for Trump. I don't wear the MAGA hat. I don't talk about him being God Emperor or any of these things, and I don't pretend that he'll do a perfect job. In fact, I don't even think he'd do an excellent job. I think he'd do a good job. But by comparison, people will remember him as great like they did Reagan, because the people who came before were such abysmal failures, specifically W and Obama, because they have been. W was a failure. Obama's a failure. Trump will shine by comparison and make it look like a regular mini golden age. And then we'll see what happens, I guess, 4 years later. That's about all. Peace out.